The Charlotte Hornets suffered their second consecutive loss, this time to an all too familiar problem, a disaster of one individual quarter. We talk about it today on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check us out and make us your first listen wherever you get your podcast. That includes YouTube, by the way. Follow us on Twitter at Walker Mail, at Doug Branson LOH. The show handle is on Twitter at Locked On Hornets. Today we'll be talking about the Hornets' loss to the Milwaukee Bucks, 130-106. First quarter, after the end of the first period, it's all tied up, 32 apiece. All right. Mm-hmm. Can you make this a run and beat Milwaukee for a third time this season? You've done it twice before.
Yeah.
After a bad loss to Detroit, hey, maybe this is just the good team to get a win against, to get that confidence, to get that momentum back.
Melo starts hot.
Second quarter, they lose 44-21. They allow 76 points by halftime because not of a great defensive first quarter, but they at least scored to keep up with the Bucks. And then they allowed 44 in the second period. They would eventually lose by 30 points. We've seen this a million times. We've seen at least the disaster quarter. Now, there are a couple of it's bad when there are levels to this for Charlotte, where there are levels to the bad quarter. You know, I think maybe until this second quarter against Milwaukee, we would hold the Miami period where they scored 8, allowed 30. That was, I think, the first time, maybe second time they played Miami. I forget, but we all know, right? Oh, it's that game. Oh, that Heat game. Yeah, that's the one. That one's up here. And then you have some other games that are all jumbled up in tier 2 and tier 3 of some other poor quarters where eventually that leads to a loss. Here's another one, Doug, after the All-Star break. Just another game where that happens once again.
Well, this one might be worse because you really needed this win. You need them all at this point. But you're coming off the Detroit loss. You really need to show that you can give consistent effort for 48 minutes. And it's a team, Miami has just been in the Hornets shirts for a long time, except weirdly, I think last season they played well against Miami. But typically Miami has proved to be a problem for the Charlotte Hornets because of the way they defend. But Milwaukee is a team they've beaten before. And so I really think this quarter was actually worse. And before I get into the breakdown, I want to ask a simple question here. Mm-hmm. What do you think the Hornets record would be at the end of the season if like in golf, you got a mulligan, if they got a mulligan quarter, if they just got to say, all right, one quarter, we get to wipe away.
Run it back.
I'm pretty sure the Hornets would be a 50-plus win team.
I mean, if you just cut out half of the god-awful quarters, then you'd at least have a handful more wins. Like, at least you'd be in the race. If we're really trying to realistically apply this mulligan rule, you'd at least be in the race, but you're not.
It's not the fourth quarter. We've seen a few, but we have not seen a ton of fourth quarter let-ups. Mm-hmm. It's typically the first and second quarter. And then weirdly, this season, after they have that disaster quarter, they don't fold up. They don't crumple into a ball of paper and just get, a run off the floor. Again, we've seen it once or twice, but not a lot this season. They typically will either rally back and get in the game, or when they play a team with good defense like Milwaukee, they'll show up, but it'll be too little too late.
It's the fake comeback, and we got tired of it. We talked about that with Memphis, where they had the disaster. They come back. I mean, and seriously, damn near pull off one of the more impressive comebacks. I mean, it had to be the most impressive comeback in Hornets history if they complete it, but they don't, and eventually they lose. And so some people feel the need to speak with a caveat. Hey, they got destroyed, but at least they came back and provided some valiant effort, and that's great. But then it's also like, well, we've seen that too much. It's the fake comeback, and I don't want fake comebacks anymore. Let's just not dig ourselves into that kind of hole and try to win and keep pace with these good teams early into the ballgame.
Valiant effort is not the same as winning effort. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's just
it's so true. It's so true. Like, how many times are you describing a team with a valiant effort that's on top that actually wins? Right. Valiant. It's almost a bad word. It's almost taboo. And the Hornets, I don't even know if you can say that in the second quarter. They didn't come back in the third. They lost by 10 in the third quarter. Fourth quarter, it's way too late to come back. Eventually still lose by 30. You've got a lot of breakdown you want to discuss in the next segment. Maybe we can just take a look real quickly at some of the players, just hit on them, maybe rapid fire. I got a lot.
I'll tell you the reason. I have a big breakdown of the offense and the defense in the second quarter, because I feel like when you have that kind of quarter, that kind of disaster, it really deserves taking the microscope to it and figuring out what, because it was both ends of the floor. We're used to this season seeing the Hornets either not be able to shoot the basketball and the offense gets mucked up, or the defensive end more. That's happened more. It's been on the defensive end where they just completely give out. This was an example of a quarter where nothing went right on either end of the floor. So I do want to take a deeper look at it in the second. So stay tuned.
All right, let's do that. Let's talk about BetOnline first. Football might be over for the season, but basketball, it's full steam ahead. Same as college hoops. They're inching closer and closer to the postseason. From all the latest odds, totals, and player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Doug's breakdown coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
This is Locked On Hornets.
All right, so we've got Al, or we've got the question how. Like, how did Miles do that? Can you help? So much, an unbelievable amount on the line.
Doug, I respect you to the nth degree, but Walker, I'm telling you, it came. Every single person who saw that reacted that way. Some of us just are tighter than others, and I just had to release this from my body.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
So you take a look at the box score. You go to the 3-point.
Don't make me.
Well, the thing is, it's not so bad when you look at the 3-point percentage. 36%. Not bad, right? Like we had talked about this Hornets team struggling because they relied so much on shooting from deep. And then when they weren't hitting, they weren't winning ball games. But 3-point shot wasn't all that bad against Milwaukee. 36%.
Okay, let me stop you. Because when you say a team shoots 36% from three, I'm gonna say I haven't looked at the box score. You've looked at the box score. I have not looked at the box score. I'm just gonna guess, just based on my knowledge of looking at box scores and NBA trends, that if a team shoots 36% from three, then like at worst, in terms of overall field goal percentage, I'm gonna say 44%.
At worst, right? Like that's on the low end of the spectrum of what you would expect.
And this Hornets offense has been good most of this season.
Need to lower that bar a little bit, Doug.
Oh, boy.
38.7% from the field overall, which means they're missing a lot of twos. They're not finishing at the rim. And when Montrezl Harrell, your best rim finisher, is 1 of 8 from the field in that regard, you know it's going to be an ugly night. PJ Washington, he goes 5 of 11 from the field. Hey, that's not bad. Hits 3 3-pointers and misses a couple of the 2-point field goals that he took. Miles Bridges, 5 of 14 from the field. Mason Plumlee hit 1 bucket of his 4 attempts. LaMelo actually had a decent night, 9 of 18. But again, you look at 4 of 7 from the 3-point line, which means what? That means he's 5 of 11 from 2-point range. You know, it's under 50%. Like we've talked about that. That's the number one thing LaMelo needs to do. Take better shots inside the 3-point arc and just start to hit those shots. Terry Rozier, 7 of 16, but 1 of 5 from the 3-point line. You know, we can go on and on. I'll let you go ESPN, whatever site you use, and go view the box score. Rough shooting night for the Charlotte Hornets against Milwaukee. Doug, you have watched the film. You have taken a look at that bad, awful second quarter, so nobody else has to. You are a hero of us Hornets fans. What did you notice in those 12 minutes?
Yeah, I felt like in the second quarter, the offense devolved into selfish shot taking and missing, and that's a pretty terrible combination when your offense is both selfish
and they lost
and missing shots. And my God, the free throws. I mean, that's the other sort of big headline. Well, actually, there's 3 headlines. There's selfish and missing. My God, the free throws, because there wasn't a free throw discrepancy in free throws attempted in this game, which Milwaukee is known to put teams in free throw discrepancies because they have Giannis. Giannis gets fouled a lot. They have other players that can drive and get contact. But not the case here. Both of them taking just above 30 free throw attempts, but one team made their free throws and the other team only made, I think, 16 made free throws, 60-odd%. It was just terrible from the free throw line. But here's the biggest headline. I'm going to give you the biggest headline. The Hornets, and this tells you all you need to know, the Hornets ended the first half without a single fast break point. Now, Walker, we know that this is a fast break team. They finally, after so many years of saying that they were going to up the pace, they finally upped the pace. And we also know that the Hornets need to be a fast break team to play good offense because their half-court offense, they don't have a reliable, release valve down low to send it down to, when a play breaks down. They've got to get out and score easy buckets. This is about the Hornets, but it's also about Milwaukee. Milwaukee plays solid, organized, fundamental defense that bothered the Hornets a lot and forced them into some of these long twos. But let me give you the breakdown. We became a long two offense in the second quarter. And I would say if you looked over the past couple of games, a lot more long twos happening. A lot more long jump shots, but also long floaters. Ball opens up the second quarter, long two jump shot miss. Thor tries a driving floater from 13 feet. JT Thor? Driving floater? 13 feet? What's going on here?
Do you practice that shot? When do you take that shot? I hear Patrick Ewing yelling at him right now.
Oh my God, I have that audio too. I'm not gonna stop the show to go grab that audio, but it's so good. Patrick Ewing, when do you practice that shot?
Do you take that shot? When do you take that shot? JT.
I've been saying more Thor, but that is not what I meant. I did not mean more Thor driving floaters from 13 feet. That is not the shot you want JT Thor taking. Later on in the quarter, Ball had a 13-foot driving floater out of control. And the thing is, when we shifted to defensive end, they were able to take these missed shots in the second quarter, the Bucks were, and easily turn them into transition buckets. The Bucks D was organized. They're not falling for pump fakes. They're not falling for Oubre tried to back cut on that play. Ball drove 13 foot. He had to take it. He had no passing lane, and he takes this out of control driving floater. I mean, that's a little bit on Ball's decision making, but a lot on the Milwaukee defense. Even Oubre was taking a long two jump shot off a Mason screen. He had PJ wide open for three. This was when they were already down 20 late in the second quarter, but still, it illustrates my point that the offense has become selfish at times, and in this second quarter, it was at its most selfish and resulted in this big margin.
I mean, Miles Bridges is probably the guy that you rely on most to create half-court offense when Gordon Hayward is out. And if he's going to shoot the 5 of 19 that he did, where you think about it, only two-point field goals from him, a little uncharacteristic, did shoot pretty well from three, hitting three.
And he was 0 of 5 in that second quarter, didn't make a single shot.
I mean, Miles has done a really nice job of finishing inside that 3-point line. I mean, he's shooting 71% at the rim, that's phenomenal this year. And he was shooting 73 last year. Like, that's just what he does. And he's shooting 41%, from 3 to 10 feet out. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, if Miles isn't hitting, Gordon Hayward's not on the team. LaMelo continues to struggle from 2. PJ Washington continues to not finish at the level you want him to, especially if he's got to kind of be relied upon to be that center. Then it's really going to hurt this Charlotte Hornets basketball team against a Giannis who might just win Defensive Player of the Year.
How many blocks did he have? 4 blocks. I mean, I don't know what the overall team only had 5 blocks, but they had a lot of plays at the rim that weren't technically scored as blocks. That were just great defense at the rim and bad paint decisions. There was one in particular in the second quarter. Miles Bridges driving, I believe it was on Drew Holiday, and he starts his spin at the free throw line. And he's athletic and he can get to the rim from, or at least close to the rim for a floater or something like that from that position. But when you do that and you're being defended by Drew Holiday and Giannis Antetokounmpo has dropped on defense, he was just sitting there waiting for it, salivating it, and blocked it at the half-court line, and it was just easy transition buckets. And this is what I'm talking about. When the bad offense, the bad paint decisions, or the bad shot selection ends up turning into Milwaukee offense, that's how you get this margin that we saw in the second quarter that only got worse in the third quarter.
And some of this stuff, like, you start to look a little bit, not only just to the last 20 games of the year, but when you start to look to next season, how does this get fixed? What can Mitch Kupchak do? Maybe you think it's a James Borrego. Maybe you think the roster is fine, and maybe you think James Borrego is solely the problem. Maybe you think it's both. I don't know what you think. But when you talk about trying to fix this roster, one of the things that they had to rely on a decent amount was Kelly Oubre this year. He was awesome at first. We were talking about him being a legitimate part of the sixth man of the year conversation. Dude's not anywhere close. Like, he shouldn't be from the way that he's played for so long now. You were hoping that he would get out of this. I mean, is this like people were, and like, understandably, I know you talked about not wanting to trade him because he did matter a lot to the offense when he was hitting shots. How much money did he lose? I mean, we're talking, it's not Dennis Schroeder level, but are we talking? I mean, how much money did Kelly Oubre lose out there if he just would have somewhat kept pace? But his numbers, I mean, they're at like he's shooting 34% from three now. He's shooting 43% from the field. Those are kind of on par with what he's done in the past. And if you look at when he came back from that first injury where he was inactive quite a bit, he's shooting under 40% from the field. He's shooting 28% from three on 8.5 attempts per game. I mean, Doug, he's actively hurting this squad, especially when he's not playing defense. And so now when you're talking about him playing against
in a variety of ways too, in a variety of ways, right? Because he was 2 of 7 from the free throw line. We've come to expect free throw struggles from Mason Plumlee, even though we shouldn't have expected it. It wasn't, that was not on my scouting report that he was going to be god awful at the free throw line, but something is truly wrong with Mason Plumlee's free throw shot. I mean, it looks like he's actively trying to miss it.
He is so all the way shook. I was at that game against Toronto where he completely airballed it. It was one of the uglier. I mean, it legit. Like, I'm not using hyperbole here. It was one of the worst free throws I've ever seen in my entire life. And Mason, we talked about, I think Bobby mentioned this yesterday on 7:30 The Game. Like, Bobby was like, you look at his stats. I mean, it's not like he was this bad in his career ever. Like, he was never a good free throw shooter by any stretch of the imagination, but he was never, like, make Ben Wallace look like Steve Nash bad. I mean, that's the thing that he's doing right now. And Montrez, even if Montrez did not have a great game scoring the basketball, at least he went to the free throw line 8 times and knocked him down and knocked down 7 of them. I'll take it. I'll take it. Yeah. And that's the thing. It was brutal. Anything else you noticed from that second quarter?
I think just a collapse of the defense. And we've seen that time and again this season when the offense is not putting the ball in the basket, the defense just starts to lack. The one thing, listen, I hate to say this because I've been wanting more Thor. And I think we're going to get more Thor in the future. And I think Thor has a bright future here in Charlotte. This was a tough game for JT Thor. This was a tough game for the more Thor movement. I've started to call it the more, Melo had a bad game. He bounced back, and this one had a good offensive start. But this was a bad night for the more Thor movement. My more Thor ites out there on Twitter who are calling for more Thor. He had some bad defensive mistakes in this second quarter, two at the very beginning, and then one coverage mistake off of the Giannis dunk, and one was really Thor not stepping over aggressively enough. Just sort of that kind of stuff that you see out of a rookie, where it's like, oh, what am I? Okay, what? That was what was happening.
That's part of the thing, though, with JT. Like, this is, before we go to break, the thing about JT is that guy does have a lot of potential. I always thought it was the best value pick that Mitch Kupchak executed in this past draft. 37th overall. You get him with that pick that comes over because you take on Mason Plumlee's contract, and then he actually becomes an actual player for you. But, like, it's okay for JT to struggle as the 37th overall pick, second youngest player in the draft, when you're asking him to do some things his very first year. And so when we ask for more Thor, it's like, okay, he's made some really nice plays, but you got to be ready to watch the ugly at some point, because it's coming, because it comes with anybody that is that young and that is that not ready to play basketball at this level. We do this with Kai. We're okay. We're not watching Kai. JT Thor comes in, and against Toronto, by the way, JT really provided some nice stuff. Put the ball on the deck, looked comfortable. Like, where the hell? Why are you getting so gutsy in this game? What? Like, you think you belong? And it's, oh yeah, Milwaukee. Maybe not so much, but you're going to have those moments with him, and that's okay for his development in the future. It's totally fine.
Let's just get this straight. JT Thor, we knew this when the Hornets drafted him. JT Thor is a project. There are aspects of his game that are raw and need to be developed. His play time this season is representative both of his work that he has put into his game in the short time that he's been in the NBA. There's no doubt about that. But it's also representative of the fact that the Hornets have, across the board, lacked defensive effort that JT Thor has provided. Effort is different from just technically being skilled at the complexities of NBA defense. That's where JT Thor is struggling, but he's not struggling with effort. He's not struggling with energy, which is where some of these other Hornets struggles have come from. He's also representative. Look, JT Thor would not be playing on a Hornets team that came into this season with an NBA level big rotation. Yeah. That is a fact, okay? And so that's what JT Thor's play represents. Why we have started the More Thor movement is that JT Thor represents for fans. You're smiling at me right now because I like it. I am on a roll. I am preaching right now.
I know you are on a roll, and the we thing. It's like you said that from a very serious place.
There are thousands of us. There are at least thousands of us.
Right.
More Thor. Yes, we've started the More Thor movement, the MTM. And the reason we have started the More Thor movement is because he represents hope. He represents potential. He represents development in a season, going back to your point on Oubre and Bridges, where we've seen players ascend very high and then descend down the roller coaster and start to lose a little bit of momentum. JT Thor represents a player who is gaining momentum. He represents hope, and that is why the More Thor movement may have taken a hit last night, but we are strong.
Yeah, you guys are real strong. I believe in the More Thor movement. I don't know if I'm ready to fully invest in the More Thor movement right now.
Hashtag More Thor. Let's make it happen on Twitter.
I'm gonna have to wait
at
for
Doug
that.
Branson LOH at Locked On Hornets.
How many more catchphrases do you need right now? Like, I think how many do you have?
Thor was stanging.
Yeah, Thor was stanging. All right. This episode is brought to you by RockAuto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? You don't need to do that anymore. Save time and money when using RockAuto. They have the prices that are reliably low for every single customer, and they have everything you can need from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil. They even have new carpet. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. RockAuto.com. Let's talk more about the Charlotte Hornets loss to Milwaukee, maybe some of the ways that they can fix this going forward. Coming up next, Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are listening to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Main character for American Psycho was Patrick Bateman, which really confused me. I always thought that Jason Bateman was Patrick Bateman and that Patrick Bateman was Jason Bateman.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Had some Hornets players speaking after the game. James Borrego did as well, spoke after the Detroit, contest. And I want to talk a little more about what Miles had to say after Detroit, Doug, because we've heard him before be the most vocal on this team when putting out the team's frustrations, his frustrations out into the public. He did it after the Washington loss earlier this year, did it after the Orlando loss. And then when he talked about Detroit, he said, somebody asked a very kind of assuming question, right? Leading into a territory where you want the person answering the question to go. The question was phrased to the tune of, do you just see teams that have a poor win-loss record and kind of play to that competition? How do you avoid that? Whatever.
Classic reporter question. Right. Do you play to the level of your competition? Classic.
Absolutely. Miles Bridges said, absolutely, though. Like he said, that's absolutely what we do. He didn't say we underestimate, can't talk, the opponent. But when you talk about like watching the win and loss record for those teams coming in, we just don't play to that level. We don't get up for them. And then we end up taking the L, and we can't do that anymore. Like, and he said, talk about, learning the lesson. Like, they haven't learned that lesson. Dropping that game to the Magic during their hot streak is an example. Dropping that game to Washington is an example. Detroit is certainly an example. And the problem with me, Doug, the reason I feel so low about the Hornets right now is because you would think that you would come out and be really competitive against a team that you should have confidence against. You've beaten Milwaukee twice. It's a good team. You just got beat by Detroit, one of the worst teams in the NBA, and you put up that effort in the second, and then you come out in the third and get beat by 10 points. Like, that's a bad loss. Despite it being against a good team, that's still a pretty bad loss the way it happened, and these guys don't really seem to have an answer for it.
Yeah, that's what surprised me most. I mean, you can definitely hear frustration starting to bubble, okay, from some of these players when they have these interviews after the game. It's starting to bubble over because the answers are few and far between. I've got a few quotes. Going back to Terry Rozier after that Detroit game, that he was asked about the OT struggles, the overtime struggles that this team has had, and he said, "We don't talk about that in the locker room."
it's Baltimore.
Might be time to talk about it because you keep losing overtime games. I don't know.
It is those we don't speak of. It is Baltimore.
We don't talk about that kind of thing in the locker room. I mean, it might be worth having a chat.
Don't do that.
I don't know. I tried to go French there, and it didn't work.
Don't do that in the
all right,
room.
So moving on. Going to just truck on through that.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about it.
Hot shot chart. All right, there we go. I got it out of my system.
Hot shot, Miles Leonard. All right, go ahead.
All right, so PJ Washington, after this loss against Milwaukee, asked about just the tailspin that the Hornets are in right now. I believe Rod Boone asked this question. It was in his Observer write-up. Go check that out. Quote, PJ Washington says, "That's a great question," referring to Boone's question about, why they're struggling right now. He goes on to say, quote, "I feel like if we had an answer to that, we wouldn't have lost all of those games."
True.
So I think for us, we've got to stick with it. LaMelo was asked the similar question. He says, quote, "To be honest, I don't even know."
Some of Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know. Is this just frustration? They don't want to talk about it with the media. Or is it they just don't know either what the problem? I think they know what the problem is, but they don't know exactly how to fix it.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the Detroit game, right? Like, here's the problem. LaMelo misses a wide open layup. PJ Washington doesn't finish through contact. Kelly Olynyk hits a really baller shot. So does Sadiq Bey, and you lose. Like, sometimes it just comes down to, okay, if we hit these layups and then we have this one stop, I don't know if there's necessarily a scheme thing and that type of overtime. Now, it's happened 6 other times, but also it comes down to shot making the previous 2 years where they were so clutch. We were talking about Terry Rozier being among the best clutch shooters in all of the NBA. And I think there was I remember John Schumann putting this stat out of NBA.com last year where Terry Rozier had 97 shot attempts in clutch time scenarios. And if he had reached the filter of 100 shot attempts, he would be the best shooter among anybody taking those types of shots by 3-4 percentage points. And, the other players were ballers. Maybe Dame Lillard was in that category, maybe even a CJ too. I'm not sure. But it just hasn't happened. Some of this is coming back to the law of averages where you just can't be that clutch, and we're experiencing it in an awful way. Some of it is missing layups, and then that's going to lead to more frustration. I don't doubt they don't know. It's we're doing the same thing that we're kind of doing in regulation. I don't feel like we're taking it lightly once we get in the final 5 minute scenario. Yeah. We just keep getting beat, and I can understand why that'd be frustrating.
Well, and the problem with not having answers, see, it's okay to not have answers when you are in an unquestionable player development season, when the expectations are not play in or playoffs. And, I don't care what Mitch Kupchak said about them being right on schedule. I think it was pretty evident that this season, the expectation, if it wasn't playoffs, it needed to be playoffs. This team, they had a roster good enough. And they showed it at the beginning of the season. They had the tools necessary to make a run, at least at the play-in. And we know the issues at center. I debated whether I thought, look, They could make the playoffs, but they'll get run off the floor. They got to make some adjustments. But they had a good enough team to make a run, at least at the play-in, okay? And so that's the problem. When you have those expectations and then you don't meet them, you must have answers.
Yeah, well, yeah. And I mean, the Mitch Kupchak stuff, maybe we could talk about what he could have done in the offseason more so. Like, I think we've talked about trying to find a center. That's pretty simplistic, but also just maybe even finding defenders. You know, we talk about trading
physicality. This is a quote. This is a quote from Borrego after this loss to Milwaukee. He said, when he was asked about the rebounding discrepancy, which we really didn't talk about, it wasn't an issue in the second quarter. It was more of an issue in the first.
Well, it's happened two straight games where they just got out rebounded.
Third quarter. Yeah, they're getting, they're allowing offensive rebounds. They're not a physical team. And he said this. He said, "quote This is our group. It's not going away. We have to be more physical." But they don't have the group.
No, they don't. They don't have the group. They don't have a couple of those players to. It's they don't have a center. Like that's it is.
They don't have. They don't have a Bobby Portis.
Yeah,
you need a Bobby Portis. You need somebody.
Nah, you need somebody more like a Bobby Portis. We like scary. Bobby Portis. He'll punch Mirotic in the face. That's fine. I don't know if we need anybody that physical. We need someone.
Scary Terry. Look, Terry is scary when he's knocking down threes. We need an actual scary person on the roster, somebody who's physical. Not many of those, and the reason you need that player, honestly, is because there are not many of those players left in the NBA. So if you can get one in your hand, and I think JT Thor might be that player though when he bulks up, in the future, like 3 or 4 years from now.
We need Charles Oakley. That's what we need. Let's just
not
get
many
Anthony
of those
Mason
Oakley.
back.
Well, that's the whole thing. Not many of those players left. So when you get one, it is one of the most like prized possessions in the league is to have someone that's very physical.
I mean, I think Miles and PJ kind of are. They're just not big. Like they're just not going to be able to battle. Like Giannis is a freak. Isaiah Stewart is like wanted to throw hands with LeBron James. You haven't seen that before, so that's a little different.
It's such a good point on the PJ Washington thing. He was giving his absolute all. Any offensive issues PJ had in that game, I'm willing to write them all off because he, again, when he plays Milwaukee, this just always happens. But he's done it throughout the season too. PJ Washington giving his all on defense, but to your point.
That's been a thing for him.
It's been a thing, but to your point, he's being asked to do things
absolutely
that he necessarily shouldn't be asked to do. And you saw it in that second quarter. You had Holiday and a few others hitting tough layups against him, and he was playing good defense, jumping straight up in the air, contesting, but he can't block the shot.
I mean, and like he still is actually like last year, he was among the top. Man, was it like 15 or 20 and block shots per game at that size? Like part of that is the role that he needs to play because they just haven't had a center that James Borrego has wanted to rely on in quite some time. I was watching PJ play defense against Toronto, just staying right in front of Pascal Siakam. I mean, defensively, offensively, it's holding PJ back so much.
Imagine that. Imagine PJ doing exactly that.
Yeah.
With a center, with a Rashawn Holmes, with somebody that can actually block shots behind him. It would be incredible. But this has been a season of would-be's. That's, a great nickname. Great nickname for this Charlotte Hornets team are the would-be's. It would have been a lot of things had they taken care of something in the offseason, had they done something at the trade deadline. These are the would-be's.
And we are putting the BEES, right? Like we are, that's what we're doing with this. Okay.
I just came, by the way, that was off the dome. We did not plan that.
We saw
I'm exhausted, man. We've talked a lot about, I'm going to have to hit the showers after this show. I've already taken a shower this morning, but I might have to take another. Whew. I have to have a cigarette after that would-be's.
Yeah, let's hit the locker room. You want to take a shower and have a cigarette. You're dirty. You're satisfied. You're a lot of things right now. You need to go to the locker room right away. Thanks for making Locked On Hornets your first listen every single day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. It's West Wednesday. Wes Bryant
going to be silenced.
No, they're not going to be. Now make your second listen Locked On NBA. Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the NBA every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Again, West Wednesdays tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, Thor.